The courtroom went silent. Same man. Same evidence. Two trials delivered opposite verdicts. This hidden legal mechanism controls every outcome in America. Here's something that will change how you understand every trial. In 1995, O.J. Simpson stood before a criminal jury. They heard the evidence. The bloody glove. The DNA. The timeline. And they said not guilty. But here's where it gets strange. Just 2 years later, a civil jury heard almost the exact same evidence. Same case. Same defendant. Same facts. And they found him liable for the deaths. Same man. Same crime. Opposite results. How is that even possible? The answer lies in 3 words that most people have heard, but almost nobody truly understands. And these 3 words determine whether someone walks free, or spends their life behind bars. But before I reveal exactly how this works, you need to understand something crucial about the American legal system that they never teach you in school. The burden of proof is the invisible weight that sits on one side of the courtroom. And here's what makes it so powerful. In every single case, someone has to prove their side first. The other side can literally sit there and do nothing. That's right. In a criminal trial, if the prosecution fails to meet their burden, the defendant doesn't have to say a word. Doesn't have to call a single witness. Doesn't have to explain anything. They can just wait and watch the prosecution fail. But here's the thing. The burden isn't just about who goes first. It's about how much proof is enough. And this is where everything changes. Think about it like a weight scale. On one side, you put evidence. On the other side, there's a threshold you have to reach. Miss that threshold by even a fraction, and the whole case collapses. The defendant walks. Justice denied. Or was it? Because here's what nobody expected. The threshold isn't the same for every case. If this is blowing your mind, drop a like because we're just getting started. But here's the thing about criminal trials. The prosecution faces the highest possible burden in our entire legal system. Beyond a reasonable doubt. Let me put this in perspective. Imagine you're a juror. You've seen the evidence. You think the defendant probably did it. Maybe you're 70% sure. 80% sure. That's not enough. Beyond a reasonable doubt means you have to be so certain that no reasonable person could look at the evidence and believe the defendant is innocent. Some legal scholars describe it as 95 to 99% certainty. Think about that. The prosecution has to practically eliminate all doubt. Any reasonable alternative explanation has to be destroyed. Any logical possibility that the defendant didn't do it has to be erased from your mind. And if there's even a small window of doubt that a reasonable person could believe, not guilty. The defendant walks. But the prosecution had one more witness they were counting on. And that witness would have changed everything. Except something happened that nobody saw coming. What would you have done if you were sitting in that jury box? You believe the defendant is guilty. Every instinct screams it. But that seed of doubt exists. A witness who couldn't quite remember the exact time. A piece of evidence with a broken chain of custody. A tiny crack in the prosecution's case. And the judge tells you that if reasonable doubt exists, you must vote not guilty. This is where the burden of proof becomes both the shield of the innocent, and sometimes, the escape hatch for the guilty. Now here's where it gets truly disturbing. Remember, I told you the threshold changes? Civil trials use a completely different standard. Preponderance of the evidence. Sounds fancy, but it means something shockingly simple. More likely than not. 50.1%. That's it. Just tip the scale slightly in your favor, and you win. Same evidence that couldn't convict criminally can absolutely destroy someone civilly. And this is where justice was served in a way most people never understood. But everything I just told you? That's just the setup. Here's where the burden of proof switch truly reveals its power. When the Goldman and Brown families sued O.J. Simpson civilly, they only had to prove it was more likely than not that he caused those deaths. The exact same DNA evidence. The same bloody glove testimony. The same timeline. But now it only needed to tip that scale past 50%. And it did. The civil jury found him liable for $33.5 million. Same man. Same evidence. Different standard. Different result. The courtroom went silent when the verdict was read. And this isn't some rare exception. This happens constantly in America. Defendants who walk free from criminal trials get destroyed in civil court. People who couldn't be convicted beyond a reasonable doubt absolutely lose everything when the standard drops. But wait. There's more to this case. Because between reasonable doubt and preponderance exists a third standard that most Americans have never heard of. And it's used in cases that could literally cost you your children, your freedom, and your future. Clear and convincing evidence. The middle ground that decides some of the most consequential cases in America. Deportation hearings. Termination of parental rights. Civil commitment to psychiatric facilities. Fraud allegations. Will contests. Cases where the stakes are enormous, but not quite criminal. Let me put this in perspective. If preponderance is 51% and reasonable doubt is 95%, clear and convincing sits around 70 to 75%. High enough to provide protection. Low enough to actually achieve. And then the defense made a fatal mistake that changed everything. They argued that the standard was too low. That their client deserved reasonable doubt protection even in a civil proceeding. The judge rejected that argument in under 30 seconds. And this brings us to the most important question nobody asks. Why do we have different standards at all? Why not just use reasonable doubt for everything? The answer reveals something profound about how America balances liberty against order. And what happened next shocked the courtroom. Here's what the jury heard next that sealed the verdict, and explains everything. The founding fathers understood something essential. In criminal cases, the government has overwhelming power. Investigators, prosecutors, unlimited resources. Against that power, citizens needed maximum protection. So reasonable doubt became the shield. Better that 10 guilty people go free than one innocent person be imprisoned. But civil cases? Those are disputes between private parties. Neither side has government power. Neither side can put the other in prison. So a lower standard makes sense because both parties deserve a fair chance to win. And clear and convincing exists for that middle ground where the stakes are severe, But the full force of the state isn't trying to cage you. This isn't a flaw in the system. It's intentional design. The burden of proof switch is how America calibrates justice to match consequences. Higher stakes. Higher burden. Lower stakes. Lower burden. And now you understand what 99% of Americans never figure out. Every verdict you'll ever hear about. Every shocking acquittal. Every surprising conviction. It all comes down to which standard applied, and whether the evidence reached that invisible threshold. Now you know the secret that determines every courtroom outcome. When you hear about a shocking acquittal, ask yourself what standard applied. When someone walks free despite what seems like obvious guilt, remember that beyond a reasonable doubt is intentionally almost impossible to reach. When you see someone lose millions in civil court after winning their criminal case, you understand why. The burden of proof isn't just legal terminology. It's the architecture of American justice itself. And here's something to consider as we close. Prosecutors win approximately 84% of federal criminal trials. That number seems high until you realize they only bring cases where they're confident they can reach that 95% threshold. The burden filters cases before they ever reach a jury. The cases you never hear about. The charges never filed. That's the burden of proof working invisibly. So the next time you watch a trial verdict and think the system failed, remember what you learned today. The system didn't fail. The burden wasn't met. And that distinction is the difference between justice and injustice in America. Now you understand the invisible force controlling every verdict. Subscribe for more courtroom breakdowns that reveal how the legal system really works. Tell me in the comments, what trial verdict makes more sense now that you understand burden of proof? And if you want to see how this plays out in real cases, check out the video appearing on screen right now.